Right? All right. Good evening, Professor Raj Reddy. It is really nice of you to take the time off. We are in two different time zones. It's way early for you. And thanks a lot for joining us. An introduction to Professor Raj Reddy. A lot of details are there on his site. There's not much I could kind of cover in this few minutes because I want him to talk. Many of us know him as the early pioneer of artificial intelligence. He is also faculty at CMU, and he has served on the faculty for Stanford and Carnegie Mellon for over 50 years. And he was the founder director of Robotics Institute at CMU. But of extreme relevance is he was instrumental in setting up the RGUKT, the Rajiv Gandhi University of Knowledge Technologies in India. I say this because I had gone to the RK Valley and I saw he actually addressed a very important issue in education system. That is, can you take the child off after 10th standard and put them through 2 years of intermediate and then to the 4 years of BTech? So this 2 years of intermediate in most rural places is very critical. That's when children usually drop out. So he actually identified a very critical problem and he solved it. RGUKTs are examples of really a different mindset, a different vision to higher education that reaches the corners of this country. And he has been instrumental in it. And I think that's the greatest achievement that he has given to, greatest gift he has given to the two states, currently two states, but at that time it was one state, Andhra Pradesh. Okay. He is also the first person of Asian origin to receive the ACM Turing Award. It is also known as the Nobel Prize of Computer Science for his work in the field of artificial intelligence. Today, he is going to kind of address the role of cognitive science in education. Thank you, sir, for joining us, and over to you.
Can I share the screen at this point?
Yes, sir.
So can you see my title slide?
Yeah. Can you kind of increase the size of it, sir?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think we're all right. I can maybe.
Yes, this is fine. Perfect.
I will get rid of this video panel. And the floating controls. Yeah. Okay. So basically, I want to kind of give some thoughts on the cognitive science and education. I was fortunate to have been work with and interacted with many cognitive scientists, mainly because 60 years ago, when I started working on AI, I was fortunate to work with Simon and Newell, Herb Simon and Alan Newell, who were not only the founders of AI, but were also founders of the field of cognitive psychology and cognitive science. And I had a number of discussions with them. And from that, I know broadly the goals of cognitive science, which is studying how we think, as opposed to psychology, more behavioral psychology, which is how we behave or what we do. And in context with education, cognitive science and education is the study of how we learn, right? What do we do, how we learn, and so on. And I would like to kind of share with you some of the lessons I have learned over the last 50, 60 years. And I was fortunate to know about many of the pioneers who have studied both in education and cognitive science, I won't have time to talk about all of them, but there are 3 or 4 people I'd like to highlight. The most important person is a professor of education in Chicago, Benjamin Bloom, who was a kind of a pioneer and leader in education in all of 20th century. And in fact, Prime Minister Nehru invited him to come to India in 1955 or 56 to advise India on our own educational programs and plans. And so I'd like to tell you about the 2 problems that are associated with them, Bloom's taxonomy and 2 sigma problem. And then I'll talk about Simon and Gibbons and Oakley and Sosnowski, and we'll talk about it when we come there. There are others like John Anderson and Angela Duckworth and a number of others. In fact, Carnegie Mellon was kind of the center of cognitive psychology. One of the early psychology departments that adopted cognitive psychology as the primary research paradigm for them. So, I was kind of fortunate to interact with and learn from many of them. Although my own area was AI, the relationship between cognitive science and AI is, in AI, we are trying to kind of build models of thinking by writing programs on machines, right? So we are trying to see whether we can make a computer think and see and hear and various other things, whereas cognitive science is trying to understand how human beings think and how human beings learn and so on. So they're kind of, there were a few people who were on both sides, Noel and Simon, for example. When they were obviously founders of AI, but one of the things they said to me is one of the reasons they're studying AI is because they want to build models of how humans think. And for them, AI was theoretical cognitive science, theoretical psychology, to build these theoretical models by writing programs on computers, and then say, this is how human beings might also think. And I didn't quite agree with them, because it's not necessary for computers to think the way the human beings think, because we don't have 10 to the 11 neurons and the brain of the same architecture. But that was, and their view was, that's fine, basically just because human beings use neural networks at a higher level of modeling, they would do the same thing. Anyway, it was an interesting debate we used to have. But on the other hand, almost all of us were interested in education and how cognitive science, lessons from cognitive science might help in education. So the main questions we all have to ask in education is, what is the curriculum? What are we going to teach? And how are we going to teach it? And how are the students going to learn it? And how do we test the competence of the students? Those are the kind of 4 key problems that arise. And the people I mentioned, shown earlier, have answered some of these, tried to answer their own version of them. In order for you to kind of follow the rest of it, I'm assuming that at this point, at least, we have a fully connected population with reasonably high bandwidth and access to a smartphone or laptop or something. So the main first question is, what do we teach? And this has always been a serious problem. And when I come to, in the next slide, Bloom's taxonomy of learning objectives, we'll discuss it further. But one of the fundamental problems we have in the current system is you pass the course if you get 50% pass marks, right? What that means is you don't have to know half of the subject. If you get 50% there, you're good enough. You can pass, go to the next thing. If you only have to know half of the subject, why don't we just teach that half and not and require everyone to know that subject, fully, rather than saying you have to know, all of this stuff, but if you only know half of it, we'll pass you. And this is where Bloom kind of coined the term mastery-based learning. Mastery-based learning is mainly saying you must get an A before you can go to the next topic. If you don't get an A, you don't pass the subject. And so if you can actually reduce the curriculum by a half, there are lots of things we need to teach in the 21st century that are not currently part of the curriculum. And one way of doing that would be to shrink the current curriculum to whatever we think is absolutely needed to get a mastery-based learning. And if there are students that want to learn more, they can be assigned as a homework or textbook reading, whatever, but not require that the curriculum to cover the entire 100%, because we need to make the space. Once we have 50% of the time, then I think we should look at the skills needed to survive in the 21st century. For example, 40% of the children in villages drop out, or maybe even throughout the country, 35 to 40% drop out after the 5th grade. That means the only education they're ever going to have is up to the 5th grade. And however, if they had certain digital skills, digital literacy and digital skills, so that they can learn whatever they need to learn later, then I think that would be a much better way of using the other half of the time in the first 5 grades, that is teaching them how to learning to learn. What does that mean? There are many things we could talk about, but the simplest one is anytime you have a question, go to Google or some search engine and ask the question. You don't even have to know how to read. You can still verbally ask the question. So learning to learn skills, namely to give them the confidence that even though they have not learned everything that is known to a PhD or a master's student or a bachelor's student, they can learn what they need to learn by themselves, like Ekalavya, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And so the learning to learn and learning to think and learning to live, they need to have a large number of basic skills, including hygiene. If everybody knew how viruses transmit and what kind of hygiene we need to follow, then we would not have to be as afraid about COVID, right? So the whole issue of learning to live may be very important to teach in the first 5 grades, including things like learning, how to cook, how to make clothes, roti kapada makan, how to build your own buildings. Whatever you need to do, you should know how to do that. And I don't know where we teach them. And my proposal is we use, some of the time to basically teach that. And when you go to the 6th and 8th grade, 7th and 8th grades, you should teach them basics of how to do business and legal issues. And can you actually take over, surround the capital and not let anyone go in or out, even though you're protesting? Is that legal or not legal? So, and same is true. Most of us will be doing agriculture in the villages. So they should know basic concepts of agriculture rather than expecting them to go to graduate school to learn agriculture, undergraduate school. So there are not lots of things that could be taught. Then in the 9th and 10th grade, you can actually do skill development. And the 11th and 12th grades, you can teach them IT and programming and engineering, whatever. So there's also another concept of semester length courses. There's nothing magical about every course being exactly 4 months long. There are lots of things you can learn in one day, a lot of things you can learn in 1 week. And so the semester length course is roughly takes up 1 month of full time. So you can have a 1 day courses and 1 week courses and 1 month courses. All of them could be part of your curriculum, you know. So now coming to Bloom's taxonomy of learning objectives, every time you're giving a lecture, you need to ask, what is it that what are the learning objectives? What do I want them to know? And so what Bloom said was, there are different levels of learning. You may know something, but you may not understand it or you're able to use it. And that's what usually happens when we learn calculus and they teach us how to differentiate something or integrate something. And it's just a simple manipulation. And we don't understand, many of us, I didn't understand when I was taking calculus, what it is and how to apply it and how to analyze it. So basically, Bloom laid out these 4 levels of learning, each more deeper than the previous one. If you know, you can ask questions like define and recognize. If you understand, then you can say describe and explain, use verbs like explain. And if you need to apply, then you say demonstrate and perform. Like if you really understand how to do multiplication, you should be able to not only know how to multiply and understand multiplication, but you should be able to apply it, right? Which we learn, but not for many other things, where lecturers simply come and lecture and go away. And finally, the deepest level of understanding the subject is analyzing and comparing and differentiating different things. The next topic that on Bloom is the major breakthrough that he made on how we teach. It turns out they did very careful experiments, he and his students. And first they taught the students and looked at their performance. This is the red curve on the right-hand side, which are the classroom students, and their performance. You can see some people got A's and B's and D, various other things. And when we give somebody an F, it'll be to the extreme left performance, right? And if you're an A student, you'll be here. And what they found is, if you tutored each student one-on-one, then on the average, tutored students did 2 sigma, 98% better than the classrooms. The average student in tutored student was 98% of the better to the average student that went to classrooms. There's another way of looking at it. If you look at this curve, if you understand the Gaussian curve issues, most of the time we say anyone that gets 20%, among the top 20%, we're going to give them an A. So if you show this curve out all the way to the bottom, that's about 20%. And so what this says is, even a D student, if you tutor them instead of putting them in a classroom, you can make them into an A student. And an A student becomes A double plus. And this is a very important insight in how we should teach. If at all we can actually provide individuals personalized education. Right now, it was always expensive, but now it turns out there are some startups like Vedantu.com Baiju and White Hat Junior, something like that. There are 3 or 4 companies that will give you private tutoring for a fee, of course. And there's no reason why we cannot convert all of our teachers and even our teaching assistants into tutors. And there'll be enough of them so that anytime anyone has a question while they're going studying themselves, they can actually provide them when they get stuck. And so anyway, these are the 2 insights from Bloom on cognition and education. Now I'd like to kind of go to Jim Gibbons, who is from Stanford. He was the person that actually got Stanford doing TV broadcasting of lectures in the 70s. Jim Gibbons is very well known there. He's among other things, semiconductor physics expert, but then he became the dean at Stanford, and he's still around. I know him well. So one of the things they found is they were teaching students at Hewlett-Packard, and people working at Hewlett-Packard could not take the lectures at the time they were being taught. So they would all get together in the evening after their work is over at 5 o'clock, 3 or 4 of them, whoever is taking the course, and they would have a teaching assistant or tutor who essentially is someone who took the same course the previous year or whenever, so they know the material a little bit. And the lecture was videotaped, and then they would play the video and have a discussion. The way it worked was, anytime anyone can raise their hand and say, I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. And then they would stop the video and they would have a discussion. The other thing they did was, if nobody asked any question for 5-10 minutes, and that means they're suddenly their attention has gone away. So what you do is the TA or tutor stops the video and saying, what is he talking about? Can you explain it to me? And that kind of makes up everybody, and they start having discussion. And that turns out to be a very effective way of learning the concepts that you need. So basically now, online content is available on every subject. If you can learn without a teacher, or if you can have a tutor on demand, which is the 2 things that are becoming available today, online content and tutor on demand, we may actually be able to get everyone to a level of performance, without the current So this is something we may want to look at for the future. So there are 4 alternative models of learning. One is learning without a teacher, what I call the Ekalavya model. And you may not want to do that for a full day, but I said, teach them in a classroom maybe the first half of the day, and the second half of the day, teach them, give them assignments and say, here are the videos and you can learn. And anytime you're stuck, you can raise your hand and I'll come and answer your question. So it will be, that once you learn that way, that becomes a lifelong learning methodology and how you learn. The second idea, which I think is teacher on demand, which is where the current startups are doing that. But I think we can adopt it countrywide to do the same thing. And then there's a third component, which is very important. I didn't talk about it earlier. Angela Duckworth, another professor of psychology from University of Pennsylvania, has written a book called Grit. What Grit says is, you may be the smartest guy, you can take all kinds of, have the IQ of a genius, but you will not succeed in life unless you have motivation and passion and perseverance and work ethic. So when people go to class and want to copy, that means they just don't want to learn the material. They just want to copy and get a certificate. They're not going to necessarily succeed in life. You must be motivated. So the question is, how do we teach the children motivation and passion and perseverance? And that usually comes from parents. Parents are the ones, if you have a parent who is constantly on your back saying, well, how did you do? What did you do? And so on. Maybe you'll get some passion and perseverance, but not all of us. Most of us want to have a good time and have, play games and not work. And only when we become employees, then we suddenly learn work ethic, because we have to show up at 9 in the morning or 8, 10 in the morning and work till midnight. And that's when people get shocked, because they go to a job and they don't know, they didn't realize that they have to work that many long hours, and including weekends. So the ultimate goal of learning or teaching our students is learn what they want, when they want, and how they want. And right now, the current educational system doesn't permit any of those. It doesn't permit what you want. If your rank in your JEE is X, you're assigned to some major, whether you like that major or not. And you can't learn when you want and how you want to learn it. And this is a major issue, I think, that is worthy of future examination. Herb Simon, as I mentioned, is a computer scientist and cognitive psychologist. He got a Nobel Prize in economics because he was also a behavioral economics expert, political scientist. And so he got a Nobel Prize in economics for that, his work. But one of the things he did in the 1980s, that was the time when China was opening up, and he was looking at the problem of learning from examples and learning by doing. And he was visiting China, and then he and a member of the National Academy of Sciences in China worked together to do this experiment on whether you can teach algebra to high school students purely by example. So they made up a whole book of worked out examples of algebra and say, fine, to this morning's work is go through these examples, and if you understood the example, then you should be able to do these other problems which are similar. And so the teacher is there in the class, but he's not teaching. And if anyone raises the hand saying, I didn't understand this example, they would kind of tell them, explain what it is. Then they have to do the problems. When they try to do the problems, they discover they really didn't understand the example. They go back to the example, back and forth, and they learn. And they found students learning algebra learned faster and remembered longer. 3 years later, they tested them, remembered longer the materials that they learned. And in this type of situation, where you're learning from examples, you don't have to be sitting in a class. It can be you can be sitting anywhere. And it also takes care of people. Some people are fast, they learn very fast. Others are slow. That means you need to give them time to go through the example and understand how to solve the problem. But once they learn it, they're just as good as the guy who learned very fast. And so there are a number of new ideas that can be used from Simon on learning from example and learning by doing. All of them are based on mastery-based testing, where you're talking about, instead of having a fixed semester, you say time is variable, outcome is constant. And the second is, if you look at the admissions in the United States, they don't care how many, most of the time they pay no attention to your class grades, and whether you even attended the classes. So this concept of attendance requirements and failing people and all of that becomes irrelevant, because the only thing they're looking at your is SAT scores. And so basically, they're saying, do you know the material or you don't? If you don't, then you get a lower score. And TOEFL is the special case of it, which is an English language, English as a foreign language test. And again, they're testing reading, writing, speaking, listening in English. And if you don't know the stuff, you're not admitted. Finally, the whole issue of how we evaluate becomes a very interesting thing. Current system is the exam time is fixed, 3 hours or 2 hours or something, and you just get a grade based on the number of correct answers. So if you happen to, even if you know the material, you would have been able to solve it. The current system does not permit you to demonstrate it, saying, tough luck, you didn't get it done in 3 hours or 2 hours, therefore I'm going to give you a D or a C, which is sometimes unfair, maybe not completely unfair, because ultimately you probably want people who are high IQ and can think fast and solve problems faster. But for most things at work are boring, routine, conventional stuff. You don't have to think fast. You just have to do the same thing, push the same paper over and over again. And everybody can do that, even the slow learners. All that they need to know is how to do the mechanical aspects of it. So somehow we need to think about what is the purpose of testing and why we are testing, so you can actually consider variable time, saying you can get, it's called, sometimes we call it open book exams. I believe they're even doing that with the COVID in India too. Variable time, you can take as long as you want. Here are the questions, and you have to submit the answers. And so the issue then is, can you actually evaluate the student performance in that way? And one of the MSIT faculty members at IIT, Praveen Garimella, has been studying this problem on technology-enabled monitoring of student learning behavior. He built a keystroke monitoring and measurement system. And if you say, not only am I going to see how long you get the correct answer or not, and also I want to see how long it takes you to solve it, right? So it's a very interesting issue. And so that kind of provides two variables. And so what you want is mastery-based learning. That is, you're asking that they know all the material, and you simply say, okay, take as much time as you need, but at the end, you must be able to solve the problem. And so, I won't steal his thunder. He'll talk about his own work. But two interesting things came out when I was listening to about his work. The time for solving can be used as a metric of merit and performance. And however, they discovered an anomaly, or he discovered an anomaly. It turned out when he was measuring time for solving problems, many students had zero timing. That means they didn't take any time at all to solve the problem. They simply, and this happens if you think about it, when you're copying and pasting, normally the problem might take you 10 minutes or 20 minutes or something. If you're pasting, you do it in 10 seconds. And so this led to anomaly detection and plagiarism detection. And many people, actually more than like 2/3 of the students, were simply copying it. They were not, and I said, how can that be? It turns out, if you have groups working together, And they will actually, the group of 4 or 5 people, if you encourage group learning, which is the right thing to do, when it comes time to solving the problems in the exam, they say, well, you're the brightest, why don't you solve it and give us the answer? We'll all copy it and paste it, right? And they all get A's, right, as a result. And now we are able to actually see how long they took. And then you can do the plagiarism detector. There are software tools that will do the plagiarism detection to see who actually copied and pasted versus who actually took the time to solve the problem in the first place. And this was very interesting set of new insights that come out of this type of research. So in conclusion then, remote learning may become the norm rather than exception after COVID. In the future, we have lots of options on what we teach, how we learn, and how we test. It's up to us to decide and do. Thank you. Now I can answer questions.
Thank you, sir. So one question which came up in the chat, the question was, how about open-ended deep thinking problems for testing? Because we all have the same problem. We give a test online, there's a lot of copying, we don't know what to do. We are doing too many manipulations to the test itself.
So that's another interesting result that came out of Praveen's research. Basically, if you have, almost everyone that makes up exams goes to a question bank of 1,000 questions, and they need to only pick 10 questions out of them. And you say, here is the 10 questions, and that's the exam for today, right? And everybody is supposed to take exactly the same 10 questions. In a computerized world we're in, you can create a personalized exam paper for every person, so they cannot copy. That is, what you do, you need 10 questions from chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 10, and you pick one out of 100, and then for every person, you can create a personalized exam. And not only that, this personalized exam can be taken at any time. You don't have to fix the time. You can say, as long as you're, whenever you think you're ready, let us know, we'll give you the exam. And then the evaluation of the exam can also be either automatic or semi-automatic. Some things cannot be done by the computer, not easily anyway. That is, if it is a descriptive answer, like in an essay in English, or if it is a proof of a theorem, where you have to write down the proof, that requires someone to look at it. But that's only, in an exam of 10 questions, maybe 2 or 3 of them may be like that. And you can actually use human beings or human-assisted evaluation, where if you already know exactly the steps, the computer knows the steps you should go through, and it can actually build a scaffold to see if you have been through those. Whenever it is stuck, and then a human being can point it at the thing. And so a computer-aided or human-aided computerized evaluation of answer papers can be 10, 20 times faster than manual grading. Not only that, manual grading of papers, when you're grading 10,000 papers in SSLC, because a million students take the test, and they take these exams and distribute them to 1,000 or 10,000 teachers, and who have to kind of go through, they get paid 2 or 3 rupees per paper. By the time, they only have like 3 minutes or something, and their evaluation is completely subjective, and sometimes they might actually give wrong grade, and this happens. And so computerized evaluation is obviously much better. And if you can actually do that. Okay. So,
Yeah.
Uh,
Yes.
Good morning,
Mr. Silva.
Professor.
good morning.
Yeah, I know that you traveled a lot and then you have seen so many students throughout the world. And still, the math is a big problem everywhere in the throughout the world. If you have the power to do something, what would you like to change the system of teaching mathematics in India, particularly?
Well, the important thing about learning mathematics is to first start with motivation, or learning any subject for that matter. The reason, what happens in general is you go into your first grade or second grade, and then you say, we are going to teach you addition. Then they don't say why or what and what are the things you may be able to do. And that continues when you're learning calculus. You're taught about all the formulas and, dy by dx and so on. But ultimately, you have no clue why you're learning what you're learning. Occasionally, you might need, ultimately, when you're in life, sometimes you have to be able to multiply and add. But even that is not very common. You're not, especially if you're a farmer or illiterate farmer, you don't know how to multiply that. And so you kind of assume whatever you're getting charged is what you're getting charged. So there are lots of things where you're kind of have to be motivated by somebody, and that motivation is mostly lacking. Now, let us take the extreme other example of Srinivas Ramanujan, the famous mathematician. He discovered for himself the beauty of mathematics. And he did that when he was a ninth grade student, and suddenly he came across this book of worked out examples by Carr, and it became a challenge for him. He could figure it out. I didn't have the same experience, but I used to have a lot of joy when I proved some theorem in geometry in the ninth and 10th grades, because I had to figure it out and prove it myself. And so the issue is some motivating factor must be there. And almost all of us, when we learn how to program and the program works, we are kind of thrilled that finally it is working and giving you the correct answer. So somehow we need to create that experience of gratification, why we are learning what we are learning, and that there may be many ways of doing it. Simply telling someone this is a good thing for you, do it, is not enough. I think we need motivation and passion and perseverance that I talked about from Angela Duckworth's book in Grit, is exactly what you need. And once you have that, and that's the other thing Bloom said, very interesting statement. Given enough time, I can teach anyone anything. The famous, he didn't say anyone anything. He said almost anyone, almost anything. Okay, 99%. And so it turns out most of us have the same brain cells. With a little bit of personalized handholding, we can learn anything we need to. And if we are fortunate enough to have a parent or an uncle who would kind of motivate you, saying, look at this beauty of this geometry theorem, which is what happened to me, that's all it needs, some encouraging statement that would kind of get you started. That's what I would do in mathematics. Not only mathematics, every subject actually. That is, if you think of Ekalavya, he noticed, Arjuna was able to do all kinds of things with his bow and arrow, and he needed to learn the stuff, and there was no teacher, but he was motivated. And that's what happened to Srinivas Ramanujan also. He had the book, And he was able to learn without a teacher. And not only that, he not only reinvented all the mathematics of 300 years, but he actually invented more mathematics that are still being solved by other mathematicians from his notebooks. By the way, TIFR publishes notebooks in case you haven't seen them. I think our library must have, I gave IIIT library a couple of these books.
Yes. So there's a question. Can skill-based education improve the current education and evaluation system than the classroom education in Indian context? Your views?
Skill-based education is not to evaluate it, but the skills basically says, if I'm going to teach you how to cook, or how to make build a building, or how to make your own clothes, the fact you do it is the answer. If you can't do it, then you failed. So if you can't make a sambar or idli or something, then until you do it right, is a mastery-based education. Skills, by definition, you know whether they either know it or don't know it. Unlike other subjects where you're simply, sampling, you're not able to test exactly what they know and what they don't know. You're sampling to see what fraction of the knowledge they have.
One other question, how do we mimic or recreate the personalized emotional connect virtually, which the student and teacher experience in the classroom environment, even though it is a class with more than 50 students? I mean, I think this question is to your suggestion of kind of taking it virtual.
So this remote learning and learning without a teacher, all of them are not going to give you the social skills. You must learn how to be in a peer group of your own, same age group, play with them and work with them and do other things that are social skills. And one of the things which is as important as learning the content and the knowledge that are in the curriculum of this is the social skills. Again, the book by Angela Duckworth talks about this. Basically, many people who are brilliant or geniuses don't succeed in life because they don't have the social skills. Instead of IQ, they call it emotional intelligence, EQ or whatever, and that can only come by interaction with others at home. They're given problem solving. That's what happens even when you go to work in a company or whatever. There's a team, and you may not like everybody there, but that's all of you have to solve this problem together. And if you don't solve it, you don't get your bonus in some sense. So I think teaching teamwork, working, as part of a team, is very important. And when we do actually mentored teamwork meetings, we observe whether the students are participating. We give a participation score. If you'd like to talk a lot and constantly interrupting, then that's not a very good thing. Or if you never say a word and simply stay completely silent, that's not good either. So you need to have that understanding of a balance of where you can contribute and how you can contribute. And at the same time, even if you shouldn't always be raising your hand saying, I know the answer, because that essentially implies that nobody else knows the answer. And that kind of makes it, these are social skills. And if you keep raising your hand all the time, other people don't like you. They think, you're too good for your own bitches or something, So I think mimicking, teamwork, mimic is a wrong English word, I think. If you're asking people to mimic, then you're teaching them to be an actor or something, I guess. But if what you're asking is learning social skills by observing other people and how they do it, that's important to be able to do.
I think the word mimic was used in context of trying to set the same kind of experience that a teacher and student have in a physical classroom as against, how do you recreate this in the virtual world? How
Yeah.
do you recreate that kind of social interaction and emotional connect?
Okay.
Actually, yeah, we have one speaker later who will be talking about, they did this group in Princeton, did this teacher and student synchronization at the brain level.
I see.
So he's going to talk, he's Yuri Asen's son. So he's going to talk about it. So I have one question. So now you talked about TOEFL and all these, and of course, all exams in India. Everybody gets 100. It's 99.9.
Right.
Okay, this is student. I mean, of course, it's a human correction being done. TOEFL, we have everybody scoring 2,400. I mean, SAT, sorry.
That's
Okay.
where if you're able to also monitor the time taken to solve the problems by each of them, now you can use the second metric to rank order them, tie breaking, if you want to think of it that way. And to me, the speed at which you solve the problem is very important. And that's what they teach, all these coaching classes in 11th and 12th grades in tutoring, they simply teach you all the tricks on how to solve the same problem much faster. They give you the tricks of the trade. And some people naturally know how to do those. Others can be taught how to do those. And so the time for solution turns out to be very important. And if you can actually monitor the keystrokes and measure that time, then you can use that as a way of actually, and so unfortunately, if you're copying and pasting, the time becomes an anomalous number, then that also is a metric. You can see how many 0 time answers you have, and then those answers are bogus. You obviously didn't solve it.
Ms. Srishti, you had a question.
Yeah. So my question was, the same.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank
Anybody
you.
else has any question? I'll just check the message box or something else. Yeah, there's a general comment. There are many who feel real life gives much more time to solve problems than exams do. I think that was what was the final exam, I think, in life is life itself.
No, that's not true. It turns out in any work situation, we have time constraints. Your boss will come and say, I want it done yesterday. I need it immediately. And so the question is, how fast can you solve the problem? And this is one of the things we teach in computer science, namely, human beings can hurry up. Computer programs don't hurry up. They just take exactly the same time over and over again. And so the concept of approximate algorithms and hurry up algorithms is one of the things we try to teach, saying, if you don't have enough time, or if you don't have enough memory, or if you don't have enough bandwidth, then you have to find a different algorithm to find an approximate answer without requiring saying the answer is this. So those kinds of things are essential part of, time constraints are always going to be there in life, even though life itself has no constraint. Until you die, you're there. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot. On behalf of all the participants, I would like to thank you. Pijan, you want to say it?
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Reddy, for sparing an hour and illuminating the large number of school teachers are attending this. And it's the second year we are conducting it. Last year, it was was a in-place, in-campus workshop. Of course, this time it is over 3 days or 4 days online. So thank you again for.
So I have a comment for the teachers. Basically, when I was talking about, kind of making up, giving them additional skills, somebody said, if I'm just a teacher, I have no control on the curriculum. And somebody tells me exactly what I have to teach, and I have to teach it from 8 to 3 or 8 to 2. What do I do? And the answer is, if you don't teach it, then you might be penalized in some way. So you let them do it, teach the normal curriculum for the whole time. And then if you stop at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock, then you can actually provide 3 to 6 extracurricular training, saying, since all of you have this tablet or laptop, we're going to have learning to learn skills training program. Anyone that wants to learn can come. The problem with that is the people that really need to have that skills are probably the ones that are late, don't want to take the time, they want to go play. And so there's an issue of how you motivate them. So this, I think this is where a teacher who is inspiring, and whether you're in primary school or high school, whatever, and there are all these teachers that get teacher awards, are people that care about the students and they care about what they learn, care about how they learn. If you think they need to know this other stuff that is not in the curriculum, then you want to make time to teach them that. Or you can even use learning to learn examples, saying, hey, here is the problem you need to solve. I'm not going to tell you, but you already have a computer. Let's see who can find me the answer within 5 minutes. And then you've already taught them the answer. So people can be challenged to use the tools of IT and Digital India to learn how to solve the problems that otherwise would not be easy to solve. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.